Alhamdulillah, we praise God. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. I was hoping today that the sermon would be given by General Spooner, but he didn't make it yet. He'll be here tonight. Meanwhile, I'm stuck because he graduates this morning. He graduated this morning 4 hours ago, and I was hoping I was going to catch him to tell us about his experiences in the Marines. I wonder if he called me sir when he comes here. On the telephone he said, no way. And I noticed we have a new member just joined us. And her name is Rashida, by the way. That's a dangerous name these days. Salman Rushdie and Rashad Khalifa. Now we have Rashida. What's her first name? What did you do? Hafiza? Rashada? Rashada. Oh, that's even more dangerous. Rashada is the first name. The middle name. The first name is Hafiza. Hafiza Rashada. We welcome the new member to the Masjid. My best when I push that door, the noise goes. So I'm stuck to give this khutbah and I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but I put down, this will help me a lot. This is something that I distributed last week, and I will just go through it with you. It is the main issue of the Muslim perspective, which reminds me that the month of Ramadan begins on April 7th. So I congratulate you because this is a big feast for the soul. You're going to spend the whole day fasting, which means you'll be remembering God, and your soul in 1 month will fulfill one of the 5 pillars of Islam. I think inadvertently it is also a feast for the body. Every Friday we have a feast here, an international potluck every Friday in Ramadan. So this is just to give you some psychological preparation before the Ramadan is here. The issue of May 1989 of the perspective is the main title is Why Did God Send His Messenger Now? And we read in Surah number 2 verse 151 that among the ways God perfects His favor on us is to send a messenger to recite God's revelations, God's new information to us, and new wisdom that He adds to our intellect. I'm trying to remember the verse. And to teach us new things. This is verse 151 of Surah 2. In Surah 43, we read the modes of communication between God and us. How does God communicate with the human beings? And we're given 3 different ways. The first one is direct inspiration. That God inspires you directly to do something. You're just walking about, going about your life normally, and God inspires you to do something directly. The other method is from behind a barrier, like when God spoke to Moses through the burning bush. Only God's voice was felt by Moses. Moses didn't see God, he could not see God, but he heard God's voice. And the third method is to send a messenger to disperse the information. Through the messenger, God will send a lot of information. These are the 3 modes. Now, this issue is 1 year later after the big announcement of last year. And why did God send His messenger now? The answer is taken from verse 151 of Surah 2, because God loves you and wants to save you. And I give here some major reasons for sending God's message of the covenant. Number one, that the vast majority of human beings are yet to come to this world. As if you recall, I put in the introduction, and it may still be hanging there, a graph showing how many people came to this world, how many will come between now and the end of the world. And I projected that 70 billion people will come to this world between now and the end of the world, while only 6 billion came from the time of Adam until now. So the people who will show up between now and the end of the world are 14 times as many as the people who came in the past. So God is putting the message together, the message of all the prophets together. As we see in Surah 3, verse 81, all the prophets came, all the prophets delivered the scriptures. The Quran was the last scripture. Through Muhammad, the last prophet, the last message-bearing messenger was Muhammad. And after all of them have come and all the messages have been delivered, God tells us in Surah 3, verse 81, that He will send a messenger to put all these together in one and crystallize, purify. This is a chemical term, by the way. Crystallization is the highest form of purification of any material. And this came inadvertently, but it's to put the message together and present it to this vast majority of the world. Vast majority of people. Number two, the pure Quran that God intends for the world never existed. Think about that. The pure Quran never existed. When the Prophet Muhammad died, what did he leave? He left the Quran written with his own hand, in the chronological sequence. In other words, if you open the first page, he had Surah Iqra at the beginning, not Al-Fatiha. The first revelation was there. And besides it was the instructions as to where it goes in the final Quran that God intends for the world. And then the whole book was written down in that chronological sequence. The last surah revealed was Surah 110, when God's victory comes. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. And then the Prophet died only a few months after that. And he left the Quran in that chronological sequence, which is not the sequence intended for the world. Abu Bakr came and he was busy with the wars of reversion. People reverted from Islam and rebelled against him. And so did Omar also. And after Omar came Uthman. Omar had expanded the Muslim world beyond Arabia. And it became necessary to write down the Quran in the right order that God intends for the world. So Uthman appointed a committee to carry out the Prophet's instructions. They took that original copy in the chronological sequence and they read the instructions and they put the Quran together in the sequence that we have today, starting with Al-Fatiha and ending with Surah Al-Nas. Now, Satan did not leave them alone. When they finished, now the last revelation before Surah Al-Nasr was the last surah revealed in Medina was Surah number 9. So after they finished and they said, let's go celebrate, somebody said, hey, let's add a couple of verses to honor the Prophet. So they added those 2 verses. And I think you know the story very well. And so the Quran was written down with 2 extraneous verses and 2 satanic verses. Satan had to put his seed there. And they stayed there, suspected, and all the believers I know were all suspicious of these 2 verses. They didn't like them. They didn't fit text-wise, meaning-wise with the Quran. So for the first time next month, inshallah, the Quran will be restored. So this is another reason, another major reason for sending a messenger now. That the pure Quran that God intends for the world never existed. It will exist for the first time next month, inshallah. Number 3, Islam has been distorted by the Muslims into a satanic cult. The Islam around the world, you can see, you can tell from what they're doing. I think they announced today that they know now the person who put the bomb on Pan American flight where 270 innocent people died. And that person is quote unquote a Muslim. He made the whole world angry. He gave Islam a bad name. We know what Khomeini is doing to the freedom of expression, speaking in the name of an Islamic republic, a Muslim leader. And we know what Bin Baz says about the earth being flat. They're just setting all the examples that Satan wants to set for a religion. It turned into a satanic cult. According to their religion, which is no longer has anything to do with the Prophet Muhammad, you kill the person who does not pray the 5 daily prayers. You kill the person who drinks alcohol for the 4th time. You kill the adulterers. You kill the person who reverted according to the measures from Islam. So this takes care of 99.99% of the Muslim world itself. Kill, kill, kill. And this justifies why they can kill anytime they want to. Because according to the laws, there is always a reason to kill somebody. Just give me anybody and I'll give you a reason to kill them. That's a satanic cult. Number 4, the Muslims are doing everything wrong in defiance of the Quran. For example, I put this under number 6, they do the call to prayer adhan wrong. You know, they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Right there, they already violated the commandment that the mosque belongs to God. You should mention God's name only in your practices of worship. And depends on where you are, you can also go on, Ashhadu anna Aliyan waliyullah, Ashhadu anna Ahl al-Bayt hujjatullah. So it all depends on where you are, but either way, there is not a single mosque in the Muslim world that follows this commandment, that the mosque belongs to God. You should mention only God's name. Number 7, they do their ablution wrong. And if you don't believe it, ask Abdullah when you're waiting in line for ablution in Turkey. You know, the people already started the prayer, and these people are going through their 9 steps of ablution and trying to get every hair, you know, because there's a hadith that says if you leave a hair dry, it will go to hell. I don't know. You just separate this hair or something and send it to hell. So they make sure that everything is wet. Number 8, they do their contact prayers, the salat, wrong. God says in Surah 20, أقم الصلاة لذكري, singular. Observe the contact prayer to commemorate me, singularly. But all of them, they mention Muhammad and Muhammad, Ibrahim and Ibrahim, Muhammad and his family, and Abraham and his family in their contact prayers. And this is by definition polytheism, or shirk, idol worship. Number 9, they do their zakat, obligatory charity, wrong. According to the laws now, they give the charity 2.5% of your savings above $50 that are 1 year old, once a year. This is the law of charity over there, which means the poor will die of starvation by the time you do that. Now, if you look in the Quran, in Surah 6, we learn that charity must go out whenever you receive money. Any money that enters your pocket and is yours, the net, you take 2.5% out of every $100, take $2.50 and give them away to your relatives, not to anybody else. This is the zakat, the obligatory charity. If you want to build a school or a mosque or a hospital, that is general charity. That's something else. But 2.5% of your net income must go to the poor immediately, which means a continuous flow of money from people to their relatives, their parents and their cousins and their sisters and brothers and so on. That's the correct way of doing zakat. And The Quran gives the zakat so much importance. God says, my mercy encompasses all things, but I will designate it for those who give the zakat. So this shows, in other words, if you don't give the zakat, you're out of God's mercy. It is very important, and they don't do it. Number 10, they do their fasting of Ramadan wrong. Just watch what day they start fasting in the other place. They never start on the right day, they never end on the right day, because the hadith says you must see the moon with your eyes. But if you see the moon with your eyes, it's too late. You already passed the time. And then they turn into the most obnoxious creatures during fasting. You blame it on being hungry and thirsty. You're always fighting. You're supposed to be the nicest person during Ramadan because you don't want to nullify your efforts. When you're driving in the street, you're not going to rush in front of somebody. You don't want to offend anyone because you're very careful not to ruin your fasting. All that month, you're the nicest person in the world to everybody. Number 11, they do their Hajj pilgrimage wrong, at the wrong time. Pilgrimage is supposed in the Quran is months, 4 months, not one day. The government of Saudi Arabia wants you to do it in one day and get it over with. Get them out of here. But it is supposed to be 4 months. How do you jam 2 million people in one city in one day? Well, you can imagine, you know. You can imagine. When I did the pilgrimage with my parents, I told them, you stay here and I'll go do it on your behalf. Certain things where there are crowds. Because they will die. People die. They're trampled under the feet. And they have this stoning of the Satan's ceremony or whatever. It's just gruesome. I was worried about myself. Also, they ruined the pilgrims by going to visit the Prophet's tomb. The Prophet is not there. Not even his dust is there anymore. And they go, I don't know what they go for. And they wrote in the perspective, tear down the Prophet's tomb. And some fanatic Saudi Arabian, very angry and very hot, called and left a message on the telephone machine, trying to prove that the Prophet is not buried in his mosque, he's buried in his house. So his hadith that said, there's a hadith, ironically, that the Prophet said, God cursed the Jews and the Christians because they made the Prophet's tombs into mosques. Which is not really the case. The case is the opposite. The Muslims are the ones who did that. So he was trying to convince me that the Prophet is buried in his house, but it's the people who put the house in his mosque, in a mosque. So either way, the Muslims are wrong in their pilgrimage. Number 12, I put, if the Muslims continue as they are, they will go to hell. Okay, so these are some of the major reasons why. Now, just look at yourself and myself when we're doing the salat wrong and the fasting wrong and the zakat wrong. And God is looking at us. If He cared about you, would He not send somebody to correct you or some instructions somehow? If he really loves you, He will say, hey, you're doing this wrong. You're not making contact with me, you're wasting your time. This is how you do it right. So, verse 151 of Surah 2 explains that. So I'm perfecting my blessings on you by sending a messenger. And this is throughout the times. But now especially when you look at all this, because God really loves the people and is giving them a chance to redeem themselves. He did not just sit and watch them go wrong. God decided to send corrections to you and to me, and so we'll not waste our time. Obviously, God knew that we are sincere. We are seeking Him. We want to worship Him. And we want to redeem ourselves. And obviously, we deserve these instructions. But God says that in the Quran. That He knows the innermost thoughts, and accordingly, He guides the people who deserve to be guided, and He keeps away the people who don't deserve to be guided. mention in the front page of this issue that, as detailed on page 2, every single reason listed above is supported by irrefutable physical evidence from the Quran and from its formidable mathematical code. And then at the bottom I put another note. During the last 12 months I presented overwhelming Quranic mathematical proofs that I am God's messenger of the covenant, but not a single Muslim scholar came up with a single reason why I could not be God's messenger. Their silence is very significant. Why can't they come up with one reason? Tubu ila Allah, repent. Alhamdulillah, we praise God. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له, and I bear witness that there is no God except the one God. With this second year, the new year, the first year was rather harsh, just to shake somebody and to warn them and wake them up. But inshallah, we will enter into a period of love and tranquility and compassion, and we'll see, hopefully it will work to save a few people. There will be no more anger, because it did the work. In the last many years in the past, we started out by being very nice, and it didn't work. And then I got louder and louder. But this is the way God wants it. If you see the Quran and the sequence of the progression of the message, it is simply because you see somebody, there's a big ditch here, and somebody's going to fall in it. So first you say, hey, you're going to fall in the ditch. But the person doesn't hear you and keeps going towards the ditch. You're going to shout louder. Hey, you're going to fall in the ditch. If he ignores you, maybe he's deaf, then you'll start to get physical. You'll go there and try to pull him. You're trying to save him. So, but this is how the progression is. Now the Quran tells us, let me get the Quran and share a couple of verses with you. Okay. 43:21. The response to every messenger was this. What they said was, we found our parents doing this, and we simply followed their footsteps. They don't want to change what they inherited from their parents. Thus, whenever we sent a warner to any community, the leader said, we found our parents following certain practices, and we are following their footsteps. In other words, we don't want to change. The messenger would say, what if I showed you better guidance than that of your parents? They said, we reject whatever you bring. Consequently, we punish them. Note the consequences for the rejectors. It seems in the Quran that this always happens. And we are certainly seeing it, although not as bad as in the past, actually, as I will share with you in a few moments. In Surah 23, verse 44, then we sent our messengers in succession. Every time a community received their messenger, they rejected him. Every time. And this is past tense. Consequently, we annihilated them one after the other, and we turned them into history. Doomed are the people who do not believe. In Surah 40, verse 5, rebelling before them were the people of Noah and communities after them. Every generation persecuted their messenger, seeking to neutralize him, and they argued with falsehood to make it dominate the truth. But I overtook them. How terrible was my retribution. So this seems to be the general trend. There's something different this time. I'm slowing down for Muhtashem and Frank to come back. In the end of Surah 40, we read the following verses. When their messengers went to them with clear revelations, or clear miracles, or clear signs, they were satisfied with the knowledge they had. He said, this is what we like, this is what we know now. The very things they ridiculed caused their doom. Then when they saw our retribution, they said, now we believe in God alone, and we reject the idols we had set up. But it's too late. See, once the retribution is here, it is too late. But alas, their belief is no longer useful. Once they see our retribution, this is God's system that is never changeable. The disbelievers are always losers. Now we see throughout the Quran, I don't need to go through these verses with you, but we see guarantees of victory for the believers and for the messengers, God's messengers. And especially the last surah of the Quran, the last surah revealed chronologically, which says when God's victory comes and you see the people embracing God's religion in great numbers. This surah consists of 19 words. And the first verse consists of 19 letters, which means what? Means this is intended for us. And from all signs, this message of worshiping God alone, people are receptive everywhere in the world, all over the world. There's so many people. I'm really surprised how receptive people are. And you can see the sincerity in their writings, their letters, their telephone calls, in their behavior. I mean, I don't think it ever happened before in history that in the lifetime of the messenger, he delivered the message to this many people. Certainly never. I mean, this message, worshipping God alone, upholding the Quran alone, has been delivered to more people than the people that Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Zechariah and John and all these people delivered in their lifetime combined, multiplied many times over. I'm talking about just the delivery of the message. But the people who believed are overwhelmingly even more. But you know how many people were with Jesus when he finished, when he completed his message? He had a dozen people. And you see, in our conference, we have hundreds of people, alhamdulillah. And this last conference, we had 150 people approximately, and these are sincere believers. I mean, I screened them. There may be 2 or 3 exceptions there. But these are really people who believe in worshiping God alone, devoting their worship to God alone. They corrected their practices, and they uphold the Quran alone. So this is really victory. And we should be thankful to God that it is not any more popular than this. I don't know how to put this, but because we will have no time to do anything else. But as it is, we have time now to get the translation out, to get the principles out, get the information out, and we don't need any secret service or crowds out in the street or anything like that. I believe that every messenger is really for the future generations, not for his generation. But all these people this is very pleasing to our hearts to see so many people now believing and worshiping God alone. And this is the criterion that tells you that you are right. Because the Quran says that every party is happy and pleased with what they have. And we have to examine ourselves as to, are we right or wrong? Are we fooling ourselves? So your criteria is that you're worshiping God alone or following the Quran alone. Aqim as-salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Mahmoud? La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah, we praise God. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. And we bear witness that there is no God except the one true God. Matt was supposed to give this khutbah, but he was kind enough to make an exchange with me. So he will give the khutbah inshallah next Friday. And I will give it today, since I'll be out of town, inshallah. Also, there are some exceptional circumstances, I think, in my opinion, where there has been, the question has been increasingly bugging me, because it is some of my best friends, some of the people that I love very much are asking the question, why announce messengership? Why does Rashad say that he is a messenger of God? And I want to deal with this question. Why can't we worship God alone and forget about messengers and messengership and all this business? And it is a very good question. It's a very important question. But I want to start out by saying that when you walk through this door, you carry a great responsibility. You are either extremely fortunate or extremely miserable. And hopefully, if our destiny, inshallah, is heaven for worshiping God alone, we will not see any of our friends become extremely miserable. We have to be we must all catch up with being extremely fortunate. The Quran describes the elite of the elite, or the extremely fortunate one, or those who are close to us. When you walk in this mosque and you get the message firsthand, there's a great responsibility that goes with it. When you walk through this door, you are applying for the highest position in the hereafter, for eternity. And you can just imagine the responsibility if you think of what do we go through in this life to be an engineer or a pilot or a doctor or a lawyer. We have to go to school, we have to spend nights up, we have to take tests, we have to flunk a few times and struggle. And this is for a job that will last 20 years. Will last nothing, will last zero mathematically. Because you compare any number divided by infinity and you have zero. Even if you go to this University of Arizona to get a degree to be an engineer, to get a job for 1,000 years, let's say, That's zero. When you come here, you are applying for the best position for eternity. Therefore, the test is not easy. It is not easy to accomplish that test. I don't want to miss anything because the question is very important. Why make the announcement that Rashad is a messenger of God? And why dwell on it? Well, first of all, it's not my idea. As you know, I tried to evade it for 8 years. Because it's not easy for me either. And I did not make the announcement until I was fired. And I was scared to death. And I cried as I never did in my life. So I was thrown into this announcement. Why can't we just worship God alone and forget about the messenger and the messengership? What's wrong with that? You see, belief in God implies believing in God and what God says. If you believe in God and you worship God alone, this means you believe everything that God says. And God says in the Quran, I have angels. There are angels. If God says there are angels, and we believe in God, then we must believe that there are angels. God says, I sent down scriptures. And if you believe in God, you believe that God sent scriptures. And God said He's sending messengers. Then you must believe what God says, that He sent messengers. God said, I sent Moses. Then we must believe that. Because if you believe in God, you have to believe God, what God is saying. God said, I sent Jesus. This means we have to believe that Jesus is a messenger of God. And we see this in verse 285 of Surah 2. God says the messenger and the believers believe in God, His angels, His scriptures, and His messengers. This does not violate the principle of worshiping God alone. On the contrary, it affirms it. Because if you cannot say, I'm going to worship God alone, but I don't believe anything He says. You have to believe what God says. God said that Muhammad was the last prophet, the last message-bearing messenger, but not the last messenger. He said that. We have to believe that. In Surah 33, verse 40, and then 33, 7. In 381, God said that after all the prophets, God will send a messenger. We have to believe that. We cannot say we're going to worship God alone and forget about any messenger that He sends. In fact, the verses after 81 say, anyone who does not accept this is out of the religion of Islam. Using that word, submission, the word Islam. I want to share with you the verse 15 of Surah 49, because it is very powerful and very straightforward dealing with this subject. Why does Rashad announce his messengership? 49, 15, and 16 say that the real believers are those who believe in God and His messenger, then have no doubt. They have no doubt. And God said, Billahi wa Rasulihi, God and His messenger. Therefore, it is a tremendous test. We cannot fool God. If there is anything in our heart, if we're not really believers, real believers, we cannot just say it with our mouth. We cannot fool God. God will have to bring this out. And I believe this is why God forced me to make that announcement. Because some people had to be tested. And some people already dropped out. They don't deserve that high position that we are all applying for. Don't get me wrong though, it is perfectly alright to have doubts. But you must conquer those doubts. Verses 15 and 16 of Surah 49 say, you're a submitter. do not say you're a real believer yet. So this means, for as long as you're a submitter or an Arabic Muslim, you have doubts. Perfectly all right. But don't let the doubts conquer you. You must conquer the doubts. Because the verse after this says that the true believers are those who believe in God and His Messenger and have no doubts. I'm going to say it in Arabic. إنما المؤمنون, the real believers, الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا. Those who believe in God and His Messenger then have no doubts. We are a family. We are one family in this mosque. We are no strangers here. We have been like this for a while because we went so fast that anybody who walks in here, they feel so much a stranger, they cannot stand it. So this is why you see the same people continuously, and until we became a family, which is in Surah 49 also. God says the believers are a family. إنما المؤمنون إخوة. The believers are brothers and sisters. So we become a family, and we care. We want all of us to be at this highest position in heaven. Because if we come this close and drop out, we're going to be in the most pain. We're going to be in the worst hell in the hereafter. And being one family, we don't want any of us to do that. We don't want this to happen to any of us. In Surah 57, this is scary. Again, verses 15 and 16, the same verses as in Surah 49, same number of verses. It says, the hypocrite men and women on that day, on the day of judgment, will tell the people in paradise, let us look at you so we can drive some of your light. See, the believers in heaven will have the energy, the provisions. And the believers will tell them, go back and get light somewhere else. Now, the scary verse is verse 14, in Surah 57. It says, they will call on them and say, were we not with you? We were with you. The hypocrite men and women will say to the believers, we were with you. Were we not with you? أَلَمْ نَكُنْ مَعَكُمْ in Arabic. Were we not with you? And the believers will say, yes, but you deceived yourselves, waited, dilly-dallied in the colloquial English, dilly-dally around, and you have doubts. And you were deceived by wishful thinking until God's command came. Okay, so can this happen to us? I mean, it has to happen. It has to happen in connection with us. We're going to grow in the future, and there will be hypocrite men and women who will come here, who will be with us, and they will ask this question on the day of judgment in eternity. They will say, were we not with you? We come to the Quranic study with you, we come to the Friday prayer with you, we sat with you and we were your friends. And the believers will say, yes, but you had doubts. Therefore, you must work on your doubts, and you must conquer those doubts. And God made it connected with God and His Messenger. And I learned from this why the announcement. I have seen the people who dropped out, and they were invariably the people that I have known all along that they don't belong. And when the announcement came, the sifting process started, which is very necessary. Why can't we just believe in God alone, worship God alone, and forget about the message, the messenger, everything else? God alone. Satan can deceive you through that statement. We must be wise. Because worshiping God alone implies believing everything God says. And God said very clearly certain statements, including that Muhammad will be the last prophet but not the last messenger, that the messenger will come after all the prophets, a consolidating messenger will put the messages all together into one, presented to the world, the message of the covenant. And the verses after the message of the covenant are very strong in saying, Those who do not believe this are out of Islam. God is saying all this, and God spelled the name of the message of the covenant, Rashad Khalifa. God spelled it in the Quran. And if you are to worship God alone, we have to believe what God said. Adib and I were talking yesterday on the index to the Quran, which ironically was printed and published 1 year before I was born. And in it, the root word Rashad is 19 times. And I thank God that I didn't discover that. It wasn't me, it was Adib actually who discovered it. The first person ever. And you remember the khutbah, those of you who, the old timers, remember the khutbah that I gave about that. And I was thankful that I didn't discover it. I was afraid of my ego. That I may say, it's my ego was looking for it. I didn't even look for it, I was afraid to look for that. So it came from the other side of the globe. If you are to worship God alone, you must believe everything God says. Tubu Allah. Repent. Alhamdulillah, praise God, وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. I'm going to borrow this example from Adib again. If you get ill and you go to somebody and he says, take these pills, and you take the pills and you're healed. And this happens again 2 or 3 times, and every time he gives you some medicine, you're healed. Then you'll make a conclusion saying, this person knows medicine. You're going to have doubts for some time. You're not sure if he's a witch doctor or a real doctor, or is it coincidence or what. But if he's a certified doctor and he gives you the medicine, then you'll trust this person. You'll not have these doubts anymore. And this is why God ordered the announcement. It was, I was promoting this opinion. Let's worship God alone, spread the word and the word that we're going to follow the word of God alone, the Quran alone, and worship God alone. Why the announcement? I actually believed this for a long time. And I remember I was talking with Ismail Barakat, some of you who participated in the noise of the first conference in San Francisco, and Ismail was very, very angry, and he determined to ask me point blank, are you a messenger of God? Now for 8 years I was praying to God that nobody would ask me that question, point blank. Some people did ask, are you a prophet? And they'll say Muhammad is the last prophet. I was very clever, and I avoided that for a long time. And I was praying that nobody would ask me the question. Now, when that noise happened in San Francisco, and Ismail is going to be here in a week or 2, he'll be here very soon, I'm going to ask him to tell you that story, because he swears that he was determined to ask me point blank, are you a messenger of God in San Francisco? And when that noise happened, I prayed very hard, as I never prayed before. Please God, don't let anybody ask me that question, because Susan Ray, if you remember, made an announcement and said, Rashad Khalifa is a messenger of God. I wasn't ready for it. And I prayed very hard, and Ismail, until today, will say, I don't know how it happened, but I didn't ask that question. So I guess my prayer was stronger than his determination. Because I would have told him yes at the time. Because I knew it for 8 years, and I evaded it for 8 years. It was not my idea. So why would anybody, I want to deal in this khutbah with the question, how to overcome the doubt. So don't let me finish without answering the question, how can you overcome that doubt? But before I say that, I want to explain why does the person flunk and drop out if he does not believe that Rashad Khalifa is God's messenger of the covenant? Or if he is annoyed by this repetition or dwelling on it, It is not a fact in his or her mind. And the answer is in Surah 45 verse 23, which tells us the last God that we may have besides God. So have you seen the one whose God is his ego, his or her ego? If God is saying there is a messenger after Muhammad, what does he look like? What are his qualifications? What are his qualifications? Is it going to be somebody with wings, a strange looking person, or what? Is he going to be a human being like us, one like us? Maybe even a silly one? Why are you laughing? What will he look like? So why then should we not believe God? When he's telling all these things and spelling the name in the Quran, if you read Appendix 2 of the New Translation, you will see how much evidence there is. God is not subtle. God is not subtle. God's evidence is so powerful, it's not even funny, it's so overwhelming. So this helps the believers remove all doubt. But the ego will be the only thing. Why, why does he say he's messenger of God? It's only the ego, it's because the ego is there. And this is why in the beginning of the Quran, it tells you to kill your ego, kill your ego. Because this is, we're applying for the highest position in the hereafter. Okay, how do we overcome the doubt? What is the source of the doubt? If you know the source, you'll know how to counter that doubt. The source of the doubt is your companion, your jinn companion. Your jinn companion is lagging behind. Usually slightly behind you. You come, you look at the evidence, you look at the circumstances, and as a human being you make a decision, I believe. But your companion is behind, and he will raise those questions. And the way to counter those doubts is to counter with questions. You must have this debate going on in your head with your companion. Ask him or her questions. Like, what does Rashad advocate? What is he advocating? And debate it with your companion, your jinn. We are all advocating the worship of God alone, upholding the word of God alone. You can't go wrong. The Quran repeats that the only unforgivable offense in the Quran is idol worship. Therefore, we run from idol worship as fast as we can. And we have come to the pure worship of God alone. We know that only God possesses all power. We know that. Nobody else possesses any power. And it's between you and God. God will heal you. God will provide for you. God will make you content and happy. Surah 54. God is the one who controls your happiness or misery. God is the one who controls your income. God is the one who makes you rich or poor. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. God is the only one who makes you rich or poor. Nobody else. Not the lottery, not the person who hires you for a job. Nobody. We know that. This is what we advocate. So ask your jinn companion that question. What is Rashad advocating? Ask him, is this wrong? What we're doing, is it wrong? To worship God alone? To uphold the words of God alone? Should we go to the words of men? And the Quran prohibits that. I think I shared with you that great miracle of the word alone. The word alone happens in the Quran 6 times. 5 of them refer to God. Worship God alone. And 1 of them refers to the Quran. And the Sunnis and Shi'is and the other sects claim that alone in Surah 17:45 refers to God alone in the Quran. It says when you preach God alone in the Quran, they run away in aversion. Which is, they take the word alone and put it after God instead of after the Quran. What it says really is, when you preach God using the Quran alone, they don't like it. They run away in aversion. Now, if you add the surahs and verses of the 5 references to God, you have a total of 361, 19 times 19. This is the most powerful commandment in the Quran. And it is in the book, the index. You just look at the surah and the verses, that of 361. If you add the one that refers to the Quran, you don't have anything. The system collapses. What does this tell us? Tells us that God says, you follow the Quran alone. And this is what we do here. You ask your jinn companion, is this wrong? Number 3, you ask your jinn companion, does Rashad have any proof? So what's the difference between a real messenger and a fake messenger? The real messenger advocates the worship of God alone, possesses proof, God gave him proof, that you must have no doubt that this proves that this person is a messenger of God. And challenge yourself and challenge your jinn companion. What kind of proof is this? Is it real? Is it fake? Is it solid? Is it physical evidence? Is it true in the Quran? Is it manipulation? Or is it straightforward? You must attack these doubts and end them once and for all. The third question is he making money from this? Is Rashad Khalifa making money from this? Because this is a condition that is attached to every message of the Quran. If the person is making money from the message he's advocating, there's another issue here. The issue is business and money. And this is why this is one of the most important questions. You must ask your jinn companion, is he making money from this? And unless the claimant meets all these criteria, you have to conclude he's a fake messenger. Now for our benefit as a family, I must tell you that I see to it that what comes out of my pocket is more than what comes in my pocket in all this. Because if I print Qurans and I spend a certain amount of money on it, and then we sell it for prices, I make sure that what I spend is more than what I get. And I go out of my pen through all kinds of painstaking efforts to do that. So this is for our own information. And I think this covers the whole issue. There may be other questions in your mind, but we'll always talk about this in the future. Until Salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
It's extra La ilaha illallah brings the chance to Douglas Brown to sit down. Bring a cup of tea here. Alhamdulillah, we praise God. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له, and we bear witness that there is no God except the one God. I think I have to explain this first. This is a gift from Naomi, and she got the biggest size they have, extra large. She thinks I'm fat, so may God bless her, send her a wonderful husband, inshallah. She and Apami are inseparable. Adita's having a rough time. Today is really a fantastic day because we are going to share together God's gift to us as a result of the conference. As you know, God always gives us a gift every time we do something which is actually a gift from God. The conference itself is a gift from God, but each one of us underwent efforts and financial sacrifices and time sacrifices. And God is so generous. So He sent us a gift that is two great miracles. Each one of them makes the parting of the Red Sea a tiny miracle. They're all God's miracles. The parting of the Red Sea, the miracles of Jesus, and all the miracles we see in the Quran are all God's miracles. But this miracle, God specializes by, honors especially by calling it one of the great miracles with a very strong assurance in the Arabic language. إنها لا إحدى الكبر. إنها إحدى الكبر is one of the great miracles, but إنها لا إحدى الكبر, it is indeed most assuredly one of the great miracles. And this is in Surah, as you know, it is based on the number 19. I would ask you to situate yourself where you can see this. It is in Surah 74, verse 35. It is one of the greatest miracles. 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 3 is 14, plus 5 is 19. The digits add up to 19. And we're going to witness this together. In addition to this miracle that you see in the wall. And before I start explaining this, hopefully make it clear to you, I want to share with you how God collectively inspires the believers. Because in this miracle on the wall here, we have the first surah in the Quran consists of 7 verses, as you know. And then we wrote the number of every verse in the Quran. These are the verses in the first surah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this represents the first surah. It consists of 7 verses, and these are the verses in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next surah consists of 286 verses. So you write this next to this number. And then the number of every verse in the surah. 1, 2, and so on to 286. This will represent surah number 2. Now you're putting all these numbers next to each other until you go to the end of the Quran. And you end up with the number of digits. Each one of these is a digit. The number of digits is 12,692, which is a multiple of 19. This is the number of digits in this long number. And the long number itself is a multiple of 19. Okay? So, we know about this miracle on the wall. Everyone who walks in this masjid can witness a perpetual miracle that anyone can witness anywhere in the world. Now, the collective inspiration of the believers is that, you met Ali Fazali from New Mexico, Dr. Fazali, a physicist, who was talking to Abdullah and to a number of us, and he said, okay, this is the first surah, has 7 verses. This is the first verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is the second verse, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. This is the third verse, and so on. Then the next surah is 286. And this is the first verse, says Alif Lam Mim. So what happened to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? It is not being considered here. So Ali said, want to put a 0 for Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Put a 0 here. And this is the first miracle we're going to witness today. Because Abdullah went to his computer and he put 0 for every Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you know, the first Bismillah Rahman Rahim, the first verse, number 1 has a number. So there is no zero in the first surah. And surah 9 does not have Bismillah. So it will not have a zero. So when you come to surah 9, it will look like this. This is now surah 9. You put the number of the surah, and then you don't put a zero, you start with the verse 1 right away. 1, 2, 3, and so on. With the other surahs, you put the number of verses, you put the number of the surah, followed by the zero.
Instead of 9, it must be total number of verses. Yes, not chapter number. All of them.
Just go ahead.
Here, instead.
Put 1. You put the number of the surah, you put the total number of verses.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so you put also the number of the surah here. Because the disbelievers say, why do you ignore the number of the surah? Anyway, with this miracle, anything that the disbelievers want, God gave them. He left no excuse for them. But the idea here is that Ali suggested the zeros, and sure enough, when we put the zeros in for Bismillah, the end result was a multiple of 19. Now these colors are supposed to be erased easily.
Use the red.
Use the red. So let's take the number that represents surah number 1 and the beginning of surah number 2. Surah number 1 is number 1. It has 7 verses. Then you put the numbers of verses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you put surah number 2. It has 286 verses. And then the Bismillah has a 0, and then 1, 2, and so on to the end of the surah. And you go like this to the end of the Quran. Now, these zeros, they're not zeros because they're in the middle of the number. You have 11. If you have 11, it's 11, right? You put a 0 in the middle of the number, it becomes 101. There is no connection mathematically between 11 and 101. Except, so these zeros were inserted in that big number, and the end result is a very long number that is 13,038 digits. Is divisible by 19.
And the digits are divisible by 19?
No. The number of digits is not divisible by 19.
112.
Okay? This will take us to the second miracle, which is even greater than this one, if you can believe that. So, let us all collectively fall prostrate before God. I will lead you in the prostration, and then we'll repent to God and ask Him to guide us. Alhamdulillah, we praise God. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. And we bear witness that there is no other God besides God. These miracles that we're witnessing are strictly mathematical or structural miracles. They have nothing to do with the literary miracle in the Quran. As you know, there is a literary miracle that has to do with the distribution of every letter. This, you know the Quranic initials, Alif, Lam, Mim, at the beginning of Surah number 2. The counts of Alif and Lam and Mim are mathematically controlled. The counts of Ha, Mim in the 7 Ha, Mim initial surahs are mathematically controlled. Every letter in the Quran is mathematically controlled. I'm talking about letters. Also words are mathematically controlled in the Quran. When we talk about the literary mathematical composition, the word God, as you know, is 2,698 times in the Quran. And if you add the numbers of verses wherever the word God is mentioned, it is 118,123, which is also a multiple of 19. The word Quran happens in the Quran 57 times, 19 times 3. When you add the surahs and verses, wherever the word Quran is found, the total is 44,008. 4,408, which is also a multiple of 19. So we're talking about a giant Rubik's Cube, which is consisting of two sections. A literary mathematical composition, where the letters and the words are mathematically composed and distributed far beyond the human ability. In Surah 17, verse 81, it says, if all the humans and all the jinns banded together to produce a Quran like this, they cannot do it. And it has nothing to do with literature. It has to do with this impossible mathematical composition, which is very simple to understand, but very impossible to imitate. What we're talking about today is strictly mathematical numbers. You take any book from the library. Every book in the library has chapters and sentences. And take those chapters and number the sentences and see if there is any mathematical pattern in them. You will not find any. If you find anything, it will be by coincidence and maybe one chance of some kind of a system. Like, for example, the number of sentences may be divisible by the number of chapters by accident in one of the books. But that will be the extent of it. So we're talking now about strictly mathematics. It has nothing to do with the literary sense. The second miracle that we are witnessing, let us take the Quran from the first verse to the last verse and give these verses numbers that Abdullah called a sequential number. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have Surah number 1. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is the first verse. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik Yawm al-Din. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. These are the first 7 verses of the Quran. And then we go to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim of the second surah. This will be number 8. And then the first verse of surah number 2 says Alif Lam Mim. That will be number 9. Are you following me? So we'll keep going to the end of the Quran. The last verse is number 6, 3, 4, 6, which is a multiple of 19. This is all the verses of the Quran, including Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in every surah. Surah 9 does not have any Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, now, of course, this is verse number 1. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. This is number 5, 6, 7, 0. Because this is the first Bismillah of Surah number 2. And this is verse number 1 of Surah number 2. And this is verse 6 of the last Surah of the Quran. So here we have 2 sets of numbers. We have the number of the verse and its sequential number in the Quran. So the last verse in the Quran is number 6 of the last Surah, which is verse number 6. But it is number 6, 3, 4, 6 in the whole Quran. Is this simple? Everybody following this? It's very easy. So what Abdullah did, he put all these numbers next to each other to form one very long number. But he also put the number of the surah before every surah. So before the numbers of surah number 1, he put the number of the surah, which is 1. So now the number representing the first surah of the Quran will be 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7. And then he put surah number 2, and then 0, 8, 1, 9, 2, 10, 3, 11, 4, 12. Are you following me? No? Okay. The first surah in the Quran is 7 verses. And there are verses number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When you arrange them from the beginning of the Quran sequentially, they are also number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the Bismillah of Surah number 2 is number 8. The first verse in Surah number 2 is number 9. So what you're doing in this column here, you're giving a number to every verse of the Quran from the beginning to the end. So if you go to the middle of the Quran, for example, verse number 1 of the last surah in the Quran. When you count from the beginning of the Quran, it becomes number 6341, 6341. In other words, up to the first verse of the last surah, we have 6,341 verses. When you go to the last verse of the Quran, it is verse number 6 in the last surah. Min al-Jinnati wal-Nas. This number 6 here says Min al-Jinn, the last verse of surah number 114. And it is number 6346 from the beginning of the Quran. It is number 6 from the beginning of the surah, and it is number 6346 from the beginning of the Quran. Okay? So far so good. So Abdullah put the number of every verse and the number of this verse from the beginning of the Quran. So verse number 7 in Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Hamd, is verse number 7. And it is also the 7th verse from the beginning of the Quran. And then Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim of Surah number 2 is number 0, as you know. And it is the 8th verse from the beginning of the Quran. The first verse in Surah number 2 is the 9th verse from the beginning of the Quran. So these numbers were put next to each other to form one big number. Except the number of every surah was at the beginning of every surah. So this is surah number 1. The number representing surah number 1 would be, here it is, would be surah number 1, verse number 1 in the surah. It is verse number 1 in the whole Quran. And then verse number 2 is also number 2 from the beginning of the Quran. 3 is also 3. 4, this is all one number. 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7. Then we go to surah number 2. We continue with the numbers. It is surah number 2. And we have the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is number 0. And it is the 8th verse. See, this was the 7th verse. The 8th verse from the beginning of the Quran. And then verse number 1 of surah number 2, which is the 9th verse from the beginning of the Quran. And then verse number 2 is the 10th verse from the Quran, and so on to the end of the Quran. We end up. Now, I want you to observe this with me. This number of the surah is one number. The number of the other verse is another number, and so on. Now, we come here to the double numbers. The second verse of surah number 2 is number 2, but from the beginning of the Quran, it is number 10. So this is a number, and this is a number. If you count the numbers in the long number, they are, let me see. 12,806 numbers. This is the multiple of 19. This is the number of numbers. See, this is one number, it's 10. And this here also is one number. This is the last verse of the Quran. It is verse number 6346 in the whole Quran. It is verse number 6 in the last surah. So this is the number, this number, this is the number. The number of these numbers is 12,806. Which is the multiple of 19. Now, if you count the digits, meaning there are 2 digits here. This is 10, has 2 digits. These are 4 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 digits. It is one number, but 4 digits. When you count the digits in this long number, you have 37088. This is the number. This is one long number that has 37,088 digits in it. This number of digits is the multiple of 19, and the long number itself is also a multiple of 19. So the whole world should be a Muslim tomorrow. So is this? I mean, maybe this will clarify.
6346 is 19. 6 plus 3 plus 4.
Yes, this adds This adds up to 19, and it is a multiple of 19. This is the total number of verses in the Quran. It is 19 times 3.
334.
334.
And
Is
also
the-
is the half of the digit of the odd one in the word.
Yes.
Twice, yeah.
The number of digits in that number, the basic number which has the number of verses followed by the number of every verse. This sheet of paper on the wall has the number of every verse in the whole Quran. And the number of digits there is exactly twice as much as the number of verses in the Quran. It's not necessary to have that connection, but it is true. Now I don't want to confuse you anymore, but is there anything else to pick up after that we need to point out? Abdullah went to the computer and put the zeros in there, and then he walks in with this piece of paper casually. He said, "Oh, Abdullah, you have a piece of paper in your hand." All I said was we want to start a new translation of the Quran to be ready in case the demand increases and we have to print some more, maybe a few millions, inshallah. At the minute the suggestion of the new translation came, the flood is beginning already. It's just awesome. I don't know what... there's something I need to say, but I forget what it is. This really leaves you speechless. Is there anything that is mysterious to anybody? Don't be embarrassed if you want to clarify any point. Otherwise, we will do the prayer, and as we prostrate to God, we remember these miracles. Oh, here's what I want to say. As you know, Surah 9 had these two false verses. And if we include these two false verses, 128 and 129, in that number, you don't have anything. You don't have divisible by 19. The whole thing collapses. And here, we're adding zeros inside for Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're putting zeros for each one. And you still have a divisible. If you include two false verses, the whole thing collapses. You have nothing. So right now we have something to talk about, something awesome. When we inject these zeros, what is it? This is a zero, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim of Surah number 2. When you come to Surah 9, there is no Bismillah. If you put the zero, this is worth erasing. Some of you are struggling with these numbers. Hey, they are being erased. I just want to demonstrate for you Surah number 9. Okay, open your eyes now. The number where we inject the zeros, which is the first miracle we talked about. You put the Surah number 9, and then you put the first verse in it, which is number 1. You put the verse numbers, 127.
The previous miracle, yeah, you
Yes.
put the one under 2. First one you put 100.
Yes. 127, right? You put the verse numbers. This is the total number of verses in the surah. If you put 129, which includes the two false verses, of course the whole thing collapses. And then you put verse number 1, 2, and we go on to 127. And this will represent surah number 9. And then after that we get to surah number 10. So you put the number of the surah right after that. And then you put the number of verses, which is 106. For surah number 10. And then you put Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, a 0. And then the first verse. And then the second verse, and so on to 106. Now, surah number 10, the number of verses, and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim has a 0. Surah number 9 does not have Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, so there is no 0. And the end result is a very long number that is a multiple of 19. If you put Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in Surah 9, and you put a 0 here, the whole thing collapses. How is that for accuracy? Subhanallah. Atam as-salah.